Good evening. Good evening. I'm not used to standing behind a lectern, so I don't actually have lectern behavior. So I'm going to try to modify and, honor my status here behind the lectern. Good evening. My name is Shashina Bray. I'm the Director of Programs and Partnerships at Me Too International. I'm grateful for your presence here. I'm grateful that you said yes to participate in this conversation, that you took some time out on this Thursday evening to be in conversation with us and to discuss what we think is a very critical issue. Last year, Me Too created 2 PSAs in conjunction with Versus TV on 2 subject areas that we thought had become normalized within the Black community, one of which is the adultification of Black girls, which we'll be discussing this evening. And the second subject is normalizing the sexual assault of Black boys by older women as a rite of passage. And so that PSA will premiere in August, so stay tuned for that. But for this evening's conversation, we want to delve into more of this idea of adultification of Black girls and what do we owe Black children. I don't see a lot of young folks, so we're mostly talking to adults, at least in our physical audience. I know there are people who are joining us virtually. Give thanks. But yeah, I want us to think about our individual roles, right? Whether or not you're a parent or you're a caregiver or you work with young people, we all have a role when it comes to raising children and keeping them safe. And so as we're moving through this evening's discussion, I want you to personalize this, right? What can you do? Not to personalize to find conviction for yourself, but to think about what more you can do within your role. So we're going to do a number of things this evening. We're going to watch the PSA, the rules, followed by what should be an amazing panel conversation. We're also going to hear from Me Too founder and Chief Vision Officer, Tarana Burke. We're also going to ground to make sure we feel as comfortable as possible to move into this evening. The last thing I'll say before I hand the floor off to Tarana is just I welcome you to be in agreement with us around some of our community norms. We do a lot of programming virtually, and so we're always setting the container. What's the best way to hold people? What's the safest way to hold people? And so a few things that we always like to remind people is to take care of yourself first and foremost, whatever that looks like. Usually we say turn off your camera if you need to. There's no camera to turn off here, but if you need to move your seat, if you need to get up and stretch, maybe not in the middle, maybe step to the side, right? If you need to eat or drink, please do so outside the room. There's no eating and drinking here, with the exception of the panelists because they are laboring. We also ask that you lead with curiosity. You might hear something this evening that maybe you don't agree with or you don't quite understand, and I want to invite you to be curious, right? Before we jump to a conclusion or label something as a thing, consider the person's vantage point. Where might that idea or thing be coming from? Also, make space, take space. We're going to have an opportunity for you all to chime into this conversation as well. And so we just want to be mindful of how much time we hold the mic. Of course, we'd love to hear from you all, but this is a time-bound program. All right. And then the last thing is just to honor the container. As I said before, there are a lot of different subjects that we can discuss as it pertains to sexual violence or discuss as it pertains to Me Too. But for this evening, for this program, we're specifically talking about our PSA. We're talking about Black children. We're talking about the adultification of Black girls. Okay. If people feel good with that, can you say A? A. All right, I love that. I just made that up on the spot. Look at us. So with that being said, I want to invite up Tarana Burke, the founder of Me Too International and Chief Vision Officer.
See if I have any lectern behavior. Good evening, everybody. It's not much for me to say after Shashina. She did a lovely job. Thank you. I really just wanted to welcome everybody here. This group of the set of PSAs was really a big undertaking for us. The way that people think about the work of Me Too is pretty narrow and don't understand that we cover the spectrum of sexual violence. And one of the things that we haven't had a lot of public discourse about is sexual violence against children and what children experience. And many of us who are survivors experience that as children. And then we grow up to be adult survivors, and there's a gap between those two conversations as if they're separate, and they really aren't. And so also for a lot of us, we've experienced adultification, right? And it might have been the thing that was surrounding our trauma. And so it was just really important for us to start having these conversations, to see these conversations in our community. When we do community programs, we try to be, I'll say, provocative, innovative, to think a little bit outside of where people expect us to land. And so we just hope to have a robust conversation tonight. I hope the PSAs will be available after this. We want you to share them, talk about them, have these conversations. For those of us who have, and I would imagine most black girls who've turned to black women or femmes or whatever, however you identify in this audience, if you grew up as a black femme, you probably experienced some level of adultification. So it should probably resonate. So anyway, I also want to thank James Claiborne, who's in the audience, and the Barnes for allowing us to host here. They've been very gracious, and James is a lovely friend. You thought I was going to say it, wasn't it? I'm not. We have an internal nickname, but he's been a lovely friend and colleague for years, and we're just grateful to have you at the Barnes so that we have opportunities like this. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy.
So we're going to do one last thing, and then I'm going to invite up the panelists. I'm going to test our first mic. There we go. Okay, that's better. So let's ground, all right? I'm sure we've all had a day prior to arriving here, and so let's just take a moment to, as best we can, put aside the day that we've had thus far and just arrive in this moment, okay? So if you have anything that may be weighing you down, if you need to unloosen something, undo your top button, unless it's an aesthetic thing. Please do that. If you need to take off something, please do. If you maybe want to even sit up in your chair, maybe try to find a tall spine, whatever that looks like for your body. If your feet are near the floor or on the floor, see if you can ground them so you can feel the ball joints of your toes on the ground, your heels on the ground. Maybe even allow yourself just to lean back in the chair, right? We're always holding ourselves up in position, and this is a moment I want to invite you to really allow the chair to support you. So relax your shoulders into the chair, relax your arms, your hips, your buttocks, your thighs. Allow the ground beneath you to hold you up, allow the chair beneath you to hold you up, allow gravity to hold you down. And maybe bring some awareness to the breath. Noticing your natural rhythm of breathing, what it feels like on your inhale and on your exhale. I'm going to invite you to find an anchor. There may be something that is said this evening or heard this evening that might create a tingle in your belly or tension somewhere else in your body. And so I'm going to invite you to consider an anchor as a way to move through that tension if you experience it. So one anchor is your belly. So placing one hand on your belly, noticing the weight of your hand against your body, noticing the rise and fall of your belly underneath your hand. And I welcome you to come back to this place if you notice discomfort at any time during our panel. Or perhaps you'd like to anchor through the feet. Bring awareness to the soles of your feet, where your feet make contact with the ground. Take a few breaths here and use that as your anchor. Or perhaps notice where your back comes in maximum contact with the chair. And take a few breaths there and notice that as an anchor. You can use one of these or all three, but take something with you as we move through this evening's conversation, using your inhales to ground and an exhale to support you in releasing tension. Thank you all for participating. Notice what is happening in your body. Okay. So I would like to bring up this evening's moderator. None other than, drum roll everybody. I'd like to bring up Jos Duncan Asé. Yes. Boop, 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 boop. I'll go back to this mic. Okay. Jos is the founder and executive director of Love Now Media and publisher of Love Now magazine. As a storyteller and documentary filmmaker, she uses her voice and platforms to amplify acts of love and empower diverse communities to create and tell their own stories. She holds a master's in fine art from the City College of New York and a bachelor's of business administration with a concentration in information technology from Fox School of Business at Temple University. Let's welcome Jos Duncan Asé.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shashina. Thank you, Tarana. Thank you, James. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be here moderating this incredible panel that is about to come up and join me. So I'd love to introduce our panelists. Let's start with Aishah Shahidah Simmons. Aishah is a Black feminist lesbian survivor, healer, award-winning filmmaker, writer, and Buddhist mindfulness meditation teacher. Simmons' Black survivor-centered cultural productions, the 2006 Ford Foundation-funded, award-winning, groundbreaking film, No, the Rape Documentary, and the 2020 Lambda Literary Award-winning anthology, Love with Accountability, Digging Up the Roots of Childhood Sexual Abuse, break silences. They offer healing paths for trauma and provide visions for humanely disrupting the inhumane epidemic of sexual violence. Aishah, please join us. Next, we have Chanel Dupree. Chanel is an award-winning screenwriter and director based in New York City. Her film, Next Stop, earned her Best Female Director and screened in over 11 festivals, both domestic and international. Next Stop is currently streaming on the New York Times rated streaming channel, No Budge. Chanel has written in several writers' rooms, including her web series, Black Retail, that earned her Best Web Series and Best Comedy. Her feature documentary, You Think You Grown, Dismantling Adultification, premiered at the Apollo Theater, and she walked away with Best Documentary Film Feature. The film began its school screening tour this year with NYU. Chanel, please join us. Next, we have Tashmica Torok. Tashmica is a queer Black survivor activist who connects dope-ass people to liberatory ideas so we can all get free. Shout out to that. She helps communities imagine and build abolitionist futures by cultivating healthy relationships, practicing repair and addressing harm without relying on police, prisons, or other state institutions. She is the founder of the recently launched Alethea Coaching and Consulting, the co-host of the Propaganda Podcast, where listeners are invited to come for the pop culture but stay for the abolition, the friendly neighborhood librarian for Lansing's Healing Justice Lending Library, and the creative mind behind Galaxy Guide, a transformative justice parenting portal where she offers resources to help parenting people explore transformative justice as a parenting strategy. Tashmica, please join us. And last but not least, we have the Jessie Woo. Jessie was born to Haitian parents in Montreal, Canada, grew up in Miami, Florida with her mother, and later relocated to New York. Now living in Atlanta, Georgia, Jessie is a viral comedic sensation on social media. I was blown when I went to follow her, and she had 1 million followers. Television and red carpet host, actress, content creator, and singer. She just hosted the 2025 BET Awards live pre-show. The former Dish Nation on Fox co-host and a comedian on Wild 'N Out, as well as an actress on All Blacks a la carte, the series she plays the role of Misha. Jessie Woo's unpredictable journey to realize her most personal ambition began back in 2017. Falling on hard times after losing her job, Jessie started posting comedic content onto her social media that same summer, organically building an audience of over 800,000 Instagram followers and over 500,000 followers on Facebook, amassing millions of views within the last 4 years. Jessie went from recording funny videos at home while being unemployed, relying on government assistance, to singer, artist, viral sensation, host, and entrepreneur. Jessie, do that. So it is so nice to be in community with you all, and each of you has a unique entry point into the conversation we're having. Are we going to actually show the PSA first? Yes. Okay. So before we dive into the conversation, we are going to show the PSA. Okay.
Is that who I think it is? I almost didn't recognize you with all those clothes on.
You know, I wondered the same thing when I saw you the other day. Now, what happened to all your pretty dresses?
I don't know.
Now, I know I'm old, but this looks like more than just a fashion statement. You okay?
Well, I wore a dress to my auntie's barbecue last Saturday, and everyone was staring at me, saying that I'm going to be a problem because of the way I look. One of my aunties said that I have to be careful not to wear certain things anymore. Something about bringing the wrong kind of attention to myself.
Oh boy, here we go with the rules.
You shouldn't wear that.
Or don't dance like that.
Or that type of music is for fast girls.
Oh, and my favorite. When men or boys are around, you need to cover up.
I remember being told to follow the rules right around your age. It definitely didn't stop adults from treating me like I was older than I was. What they should have told me is that it's the adult's job to follow those rules, not mine.
Because the truth is, it doesn't matter what you wear, okay? Making children responsible for their own safety and for the behavior of adults is so wrong. Kids should get to be kids.
Baby girl, next time someone tells you to change the way you are to make adults feel more comfortable, you tell them to come talk to me. Respectfully, that's the rule.
For our voiceover actresses, Jessie Woo and the Tarana Burke. Is my mic going? Okay. So before we start, I want to say to the audience that it is my intention as the moderator of this conversation to evoke answers that help us all to see ourselves and for this to be a healing space. If we can touch on a bit of healing here, and if that trickles out into the people who are watching, and if we're able to take something into our families and our communities from this discussion that can then be transferred to folks who may not have language or an understanding of what some of these terms are or how our culture has perpetuated some of these ideas, is my goal as the moderator to really just try to bring all of that out so that people can carry it away. So with that, each of you brings a very unique entry point to this conversation. And so can you talk a bit about your work and how your work connects to the issue of childhood sexual assault and the adultification of Black girls?
Hey, okay. So I started my work around 8 years ago. A few things were happening at the same time. So the petition, I don't know if you guys remember it, the petition begging for Blue Ivy's hair to be straightened happened back in that time. She was like 2 at the time. And then Quavanzane Wallace, she was nominated for an Oscar. She was at the Oscars, and Chrissy Teigen decided to say that she was disrespectful and she was rude, and even referred to her as a C word. And I was 20 at the time. That was actually 11 years ago. So I was 20 at the time, and I remember feeling like, what is that? What is it about you seeing a child and you are just placing these like adult-like attributes onto them? And it was simply because she asked for her name to be pronounced correctly, and all the adults were coming over and just, whatever, girls, I'll call you whatever I want. And she was like, no, my name is this. And from that, she's called the C word, and she's just adultified in this way. And I was also in therapy at the time and learning how much childhood is important. And that started me on my research. Georgetown in 2016 came out with a research called Girlhood Interrupted. It's like 26 pages, and I read through it, and I was going to write a narrative movie about it, but something made me want to go back and into the psyche of how this all began for us. So that's how I got into this space.
Great, thank you. Tashmica? Is this, hello? Okay. So I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and so I'm not sure that there's ever been a time that this wasn't in some format my work. And so it started as me counseling my friends who were disclosing to me randomly as a child, and then I started doing work that quickly it became very real to me that no matter what kind of work I involved myself in, sexual violence was going to be a component. So whether I was working to provide AIDS orphans in rural Uganda with education, I was actively supporting them in getting safer, because if they had school, if they had a uniform, if they had food, they were safer from sexual violence. If I was working on anti-genocide work in Sudan, as a community organizer, I was raising money so that the UN could walk with women trying to collect firewood so they wouldn't be raped. And then eventually I started my own organization and started to really recognize what we're talking about in this PSA, which is we often tell children, if something happens to you, tell somebody, ask for help. But we rarely say to adults, you are responsible for creating the kind of relationship that allows for children to come to you when something terrible has happened, regardless of what it is. And so it became very clear that sexual violence is actually not a problem of making sure that children have resources. It's actually a problem of adults, and that adults don't do the work that they're supposed to do, whether it's healing, relationship building, accountability, to actually show up for kids in the way that makes it safe enough for them to be able to ask for what they need. Thank you so much, Tashmica. Aishah?
Thank you. I am also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and so it's been a part of my life for a long time, for over 4 decades, but interestingly enough, when I entered the work around addressing sexual violence, specifically in Black communities, I didn't deal with childhood sexual abuse up front. I didn't, like it was something acknowledged, and I would say, oh, I'm an incest survivor, but I never went into it. And so it wasn't until after I made my film, No, the Rape documentary, that I was really able to tap into the trauma that I experienced as a child. Could always talk about what happened to me in college in terms of sexual assault, but never could talk about what was going on, what happened to me as a child. And so, and then also recognizing that so many folks were often disclosing, and those of us who had been raped as adults, many of us had been assaulted as children and weren't protected by our family. And there are times when the family can't necessarily, you can't always ensure that your children are safe. Or you do the best you can. But then, even as Tashmica mentioned, as this PSA talked about, going to, receive support, then being silenced and shamed. So that led me to my anthology, Love with Accountability, Digging Up the Roots of Child Sexual Abuse, really inviting diasporic Black people who are survivors to write about their experiences, and also, in addition to sharing about their experiences, writing about envisioning how we can end this, how can we disrupt it. And so that's really has been my work since 1994. in terms of sexual violence, doing specifically childhood sexual abuse was later, but just really being committed. And I should also say Tashmica is one of the contributors to the anthology.
Thank you. Thank you. Jessie.
Well, I also am a survivor of sexual assault as a child, unfortunately, but fortunately, because I am a survivor. I think my work in this space began when I met Tarana. I was on Love and Hip Hop. It was 2018. Don't ask me how I ended up on there. But I was sharing a story about that because at the time, a very well-known producer had been called out by other women in the music industry for assaulting them. And I was like, oh my God, me too. It had happened to me by that same person. And it kind of just like woke up that what happened to me as a child. And so I've just been vocal about that ever since. It was documented on the show. And, I unfortunately, as a survivor, you kind of get assaulted again when you share your story and people have certain reactions to it. Like, it's one thing when so many of us have experienced that our family members did not protect us. I remember as a kid when I was assaulted when I was 9, the next morning I spoke up then and I said, hey, this person did this to me, and I wasn't believed. But then, even as a 9-year-old, I remembered, wait a minute, this person assaulted me when I was 4. Like, I started having like those flashbacks and I was like, oh no. And then come to find out it was an older cousin and he had been doing it to all the cousins. But, that when people don't believe you, it's another assault. When the public don't, we see what's going on right now with different trials and, different people who are getting swept up, thank God. But I think for me, my work is not only just talking about my experiences, but also like just letting people know, like Tarana said it best with this, me too, like you're not alone, and just encouraging survivors that it's not our place to be ashamed. Like, I am not ashamed of what has happened to me. I'm actually ashamed for the way folks treat survivors. And I think that the more we all speak about this, the more we can change, the atmosphere so that future survivors don't have to live in the shadows of like what happened to them. So that's my voice in all of that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, So I really love this PSA, and I love the title, The Rules, because when you think about rules, it makes you feel like it's something that needs to be learned. It's something that needs to be adhered to. And in some cases, the rules are something that need to be followed in order for people to survive in a household or in a community or in a culture. And so I want to invite all of the panelists, but all of the audience to just like take a moment and think about your family and think about your community. Were there any rules that you felt you were supposed to uphold or abide by that adultified children? And so I want to ask all of the panelists if you could speak to that in your family, in your community. How were there rules that adultified Black girls?
I mean, yeah, I'm Haitian, and there are so many rules just to exist as a Haitian woman. Everything is your fault. It's a very misogynistic culture, and just even from when I was a child, it was, don't dress like this, or, don't speak this way, or, that creepy uncle or that creepy cousin that comes in that you don't want to hug, you don't want to greet. But as a kid, you're required to hug everyone, even that family friend that's going to hug you a little longer. If you don't abide by that, then you're disrespectful. You're not respecting your elders. And so, yeah, I mean, those rules alone
it made you walk into a room already guilty for something you're not even responsible for. Like, I'm just a kid. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just a girl. Why do I have to, like, diminish myself when I'm coming in here just so my uncle doesn't rape me? Like, it's just ridiculous. So, yeah, I think that as a child, definitely. And then you don't even realize it, but as you grow older, you take that with you. Because even as a woman, you're told, oh, well, you had that skirt on and it was showing a little butt cheek and that's why you got raped. Like, literally, like, so those things carry on from when you're a child to when you're an adult. And so, yeah, like, those were the rules. Don't dress like this. Don't talk like this. You being too grown. It's just like, and as a girl, you just don't get to just be a girl. So.
I think overall I was taught that, like, having boundaries and agency was me being rude, me being mean. Like, to piggyback on what you said, if you don't want to hug someone that doesn't want to hug you, don't be rude, don't be mean. I just don't want to hug you right now. I just don't feel like doing that, and that should be okay. I remember the whole, like, don't dance like that. And I remember thinking, like, what is like that? Because, you know, when you're young, you just got your knees and your hips. You don't know what you're doing. You're just kind of doing this. And it's just like, don't dance like that. Do you see who's here? And I'm like, family. Right. So family is dangerous. And I should keep myself safe from them. I remember, I always say that there's, like, a turn, like, every girl or, you know, femme-presenting person, they've experienced this when they grow up, that, like, things that you were normally doing just as just a regular child quickly turned sexual. I remember the day when eating a lollipop in public was no longer safe. And it was from men who watched me grow up. They would, oh, look at Chanel, she's so cute. The moment I was, like, 11, it was all of a sudden this sexual thing. And I'm confused about that. And I'm going home to my parents and they're just like, well, ignore them, take the other route. Instead of having me process what that means for me and that this is not my fault. You're telling me I should just go hide. And I understand having an exit strategy, but not telling me that this is wrong, this is what they're doing to you, and you don't deserve this. I think that definitely would have helped. I remember my mom was very touchy, unfortunately, which is something that I was uncovering at the same time during therapy. And that definitely then grew and manifested into me being in a relationship where there was rape as well. And it's beautiful what you said, what we learn as kids, that you can be touched as much as you want and you can't say anything about it. Even if you don't want to be touched, it's going to happen to you no matter what. And I think that I just learned to just accept and be quiet and kind of close your eyes until the trauma passes. But then you learn that the trauma doesn't pass, it just buries. So,
yeah. Thank you, Chanel.
Thank you.
Thank you both for sharing. Yeah, the rules for me, basically, I was raised to speak out against injustice or anything happening, raised a very activist family, but yet the rules were like, as long as it's, the injustices could only be external. Injustices couldn't be internal. So when I told what was happening to me at the hands of my grandfather and at the hands of a son who was 11 years older than me, of a family friend, it was, well, the grandfather, no one believed me, and the family friend, I was 12 and he was 23, and my parents told me that I was flirting with him. And it wasn't until therapy, my freshman year in college, I was retelling the story. I wasn't even telling the story to me. I was just like, oh yeah, when I was 12, you know, I was flirting with this guy. And I remember it was like my therapist at the time, like, slammed on brakes. It was like, whoa, how old were you? And I was like, oh, 12. And she was like, how old was he? And I was like, 23. She was like, that's not flirting. You know, and I remember, like, it was like, she kind of like took me back in time in that session, and it just shifted my gaze, right? Because, and it was like, my parents were divorced, and it was a three-way. I'll never forget that phone conversation, because I did tell. he was banished and put out of my dad's house and all that, but somehow I was at fault. And then when I started, well, this was all during the same time about hitting adolescence and puberty, I was told to cover up, like wear a sweater, cover up. Like, so there was all this way in which I was told that it was my fault. And, you know, and I'll stop the mic, but I think that there's something about that intergenerational trauma, because my mother experienced harm, sexual harm, and my grandmother's experiences. So how do we kind of like this reinforcing and passing it on generationally, right?
Yes.
When I think about the way it showed up for me, it was this sense of exceptionalism where I was supposed to be better and be able to overcome anything. I was supposed to be able to navigate things with more character than the people that were hurting me or that were doing things that were inappropriate. And I also think about how heavy it feels. Like even when I was preparing for tonight, I was reading some of the research, reminding myself, and I just felt this sense like I wanted to shake off hands. Like it just feels like there's this constant weight of expectation, and there's not really a way to follow the rules, right? There's not really a way to actually do things that actually make us safe. And I'm also thinking about how often people tell us how to be safe when we're saying what our strategies are, right? Like when I was doing things to navigate people who were putting their hands on me in a way that I thought was going to help me survive, that wasn't confrontational, people would be like, why didn't you fight them? Why didn't you yell? Why didn't you scream? I'm like, because I didn't want to die, right? Like, I would like to survive this experience. And I'm like, I don't understand how you think you're so much more qualified than I am. I am 45 years old. I'm a survivor of sexual violence. I have worked with so many survivors. And the idea that someone could come to me and tell me more rules that will keep me safe is bananas to me. And yet that's what sexual violence, like that's what misogyny is, right? They like come to you and you're like, oh, if you just follow more rules, you'll be more safe. And I'm like, please explain to me how, like literally we have an epidemic of child sexual abuse in this country if the rules are so concrete.
Whew, such incredible and enlightening points. And I think if we really think about all of the rules that each of us has felt like we have had to follow or have tried to follow, and then how we become adults, and we carry that with us in every aspect of our lives, from how we work to how we interact with people in public. And then as we become parents, we often pass those rules on to our children, even though we know what they did to us, but we have not always taken the space or time to have conversations like this where we could identify what exactly those rules were, how they made us feel unsafe or incapable of protecting ourselves and navigating what was going on. And we haven't confronted ourselves and the need to stop, to not pass this on to anyone else. So thank you. Thank you so much. Chanel, I know that you made a film specifically about childhood sexual abuse. Can you tell us a bit about the film? And I think we're ready to see a trailer. Okay, so can you just tell us a little bit about it, and then we'd like to cue up the trailer.
Yeah, so I went on this journey of researching for about 7 years, and I knew that I want to touch on everything. When we research adultification, they're usually talking about schools or detention centers. They rarely talk about the home. So that's why I wanted to call it You Think You Grown, because a lot of Black women may not even know that they've experienced adultification, but when you hear that sound, you go back to a memory, you go back to a moment. Also, I wanted Black women to know this is about us, because you know, when I talk about my film, people immediately say, well, Black men go through that too. You know, we go through that too. Man.
Black man.
Young Black man. That's it.
Mine's are you 80.
Okay. And rarely when we do things for, even when we do things for Black women, it's like, well, as a woman of color, I completely understand. And if as a Black woman, you quickly know when you're in a room with women of color that you Black. And I wanted something for us to know this is for us. And through that research, I wanted to go all the way back to how it started, from you looking at a Black girl and thinking that she's adult. And then also how it kind of disables our transition into our womanhood, because how are we supposed to have agency and stand up for ourselves and do the whole black girl magic thing if we were not given any of that agency when we were adults? So we go through, like, from the beginnings of slavery all the way till now, how it affects us in the media, how looking at these memes of us also affects how we feel and how children feel, and what sexual violence. I had a therapist who specializes in sexual trauma therapy speak to what that does to your psyche when you've already grown up in a house where you're learning that your body is just a playground for everyone to just distort. And that's the full totality of the film, just kind of tracking and defining how we got here and what we can do to dismantle it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's watch the trailer.
So of course, this documentary is entitled "You Think You Grown," a phrase us black girls have heard from the beginning of time. When you hear that phrase, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
When I hear that phrase, I think of the many times I was in grown folks' business. Don't wear that, you're too grown. Don't do that, you're too grown.
Pretty much anytime you're doing anything outside of what people believe a child should be doing.
The foundation laid towards the unique intersection of race and gender that black girls fall into dates back to the early 1800s.
Our ancestors were enslaved laborers. They were forced to be laborers. So before they were women or men, they were tools. The effect of generations of institutional racism has created this collective psychology around black children that makes them criminalized and considered as adults.
It's interesting how a girl's body or a femme body turns into something like out of nowhere. It almost feels like out of nowhere what I'm wearing is a big deal.
They would tell me that I'm fast or I'm being grown just for understanding more than they want me to know.
I've been told so many times that the way that I dress or the way that I talk or the way that I behave is as if I'm trying to get like men's attention or men's validation, when really I was just wearing clothes, I was just talking, I was just existing.
What follows them into adulthood is the insecurity of how I look versus who I am and how I feel.
I've seen a lot of archetypes of black women on social media, on TikTok specifically. It's like you have to be a specific type of black woman, and it just never feels like it encompasses all black women. It's like, okay, well, I love Afros, but this is enough. Like just this.
We black women have a tendency to exhale excellence and best believe that this is only the beginning of all that you will leave. Do not let these people destroy the legacy that you will leave. That resilience, it flows through your bloodstream and your heart's mind. It is within you. It is in your genealogy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that offering. And I agree. When you hear, you think you're grown, that really, it hits home. And it makes me wonder, like, what is it in our culture, in our families, in our homes that makes adults want to make black girls grow up? Like, why is it so unsafe to be childlike? To have that freedom. There's one young lady that's coming to my mind. I was saying, I don't know if I want to say her name, because it's kind of all over the internet right now. But that little girl that's doing the boots on the ground. Oh, I love that baby. And someone has called like the DHS on the mother because she dances well. She's super talented. And they felt like she was being, I guess, over getting too much attention. And I don't know the whole situation, but I know that when I see her, there's just so much joy in her being a 4-year-old girl who can really dance. What is it about adults that see children like that and immediately either want to get the justice system involved or make them change their behavior so that they can be more adult-like?
I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between protection and projection. I think they think that they go one and the same. And a lot of, due to our history being extremely hard, you know, I'm being this hard on you because I want to keep you safe. We've heard that so often. But I think the problem is you make the child the problem. You make their existence and their behavior a problem instead of correcting them and telling them that the world has the problem. And so I think that a lot of us are in like a stunted childlike state who hasn't processed how they were adultified. But it's like, because we've all seen those adults that, you know, refuse therapy and it's like, I'm good, I'm fine. It's like, you're not, baby. You're not fine at all. And what's the next thing to do? You spew it to this younger generation. I think that a lot of adults who were adultified and were not able to have the joys of their childhood feels envious of seeing another child enjoy theirs. Because it's like, well, I didn't get it, so you don't deserve it. And we shouldn't walk in that mentality in that whole area. You know, that envy can then turn into a knife when we are experiencing our children. And then also, like, we have to all deal with our own feelings and internalized misogynoir. If you are looking at a young child merely just dancing or just enjoying life, having their shoulders out in the middle of 95-degree weather, and you think of something sexual, I think a lot of adults don't pull back, pause, and say, why do I think that? Why? It's hot. This baby has short sleeves on. How is that sexual? And then turn it on. Maybe I should not have adults that think sexual about children around my child. Because then, like, we already naturally have to maneuver abusers in our day-to-day, but to have to do it in the household is, it prepares us to do it. It prepares us to say, this is a world full of snakes, and I am for their appetite. And so that's how I should maneuver through the world.
Let's have Jessie speak to this as well.
I was going to add to what you said, because I think that's such a great example. The young girl's name is Miss Shirley. And while I do think everything you said is valid, but also I do think that sometimes parents have ways of adultifying their children too. Calling a 4-year-old Miss Shirley, you know, and then having older men get to pay to come take pictures with her. You know, I think sometimes, you know, now we're dealing with social media. And I remember when I was a kid, it was John Bonet, right? John Bonet, we saw how John Bonet was adultified. You know, she was a white girl. But now with TikTok, you see so many more John Bonets and you don't even realize it, because now there's this pressure from parents who want to turn their child into a celebrity immediately.
That's true.
And so, you know, Miss Shirley, I remember she recently went on the Jennifer Hudson show and she did the boots on the ground. It was cute. But then there was a camera angle when the camera went right up her butt. Like, and that was shown. And so, yes, she's being a child. Like, she's being a child. But it's the responsibility of the adult. It goes back to, I can't remember who was saying it, but the rule should be for the adults. I don't care how many boots she got on the ground. We don't need to be zooming in on, you know what I mean? Like, or we should not be allowing men to come and interact with children a certain way. It goes back to even something that we were saying, which was like that uncle that you are required to hug longer when you know you don't want to hug that person. You know, for all we know, Miss Shirley don't got no agency. She's a 4-year-old. So she's just out here boots on the ground, and she's doing what she does, not understanding what's happening, like, as far as the adults around her. So I think it all goes back to us as adults. Would I call CPS? No. But it's us as adults being able to talk to the other adult and say, hey, let's do better by that baby, you know, or hey, let's not allow these things to surround the children. I think, like, we just fail kids every day. Like, I just see it so much. And as a kid that I feel like I was failed when I was, sexually assaulted, I see it so much on social media. And we need to communicate the rules, like Tarana said, in the PSA. We need to communicate the rules to adults. We need to normalize adults being responsible for the sexual assault of children, period. So
thank you. Thank you so much. One of the things I appreciate about the culture of the team with Me Too, I experienced this with 3 people as I came in the door. When people walked up to me, they smiled and then they said, "Can I hug you?" And that is a culture of consent. And I truly believe that that is one of the answers to beginning to dismantle rape culture. And so I would like to really talk about the tradition of rape culture. And let's define it. Is there anyone, well, it's hard to ask this, the definitions are literally right there, but is there anyone who does not know what rape culture is? Okay, so we have one person. The definitions are there, but I have a summarized version here. Rape culture is a set of attitudes, beliefs, and practices that normalize and excuse sexual violence and deny people agency over their bodies. Rape culture spreads through media, language, and glamorizes violence by reinforcing gender inequity and victim blaming. Oh, you got raped because you wore that short outfit. Oh, you got raped because you went there and there were all boys. Oh, you got, that kind of thing. Rape culture relies on other systems of oppression to perpetuate victim blaming and gender inequity, including hegemonic masculinity and patriarchy. So I truly believe in the same ways that patriarchy and white supremacy push to have cultures assimilate by removing diversity, erasing history, and suppressing cultural expression, rape culture attempts to force femmes and gender nonconforming people to assimilate to the culture by vilifying anything perceived as deviant, whether it's a sassiness in one's attitude, the way someone expresses their gender, or the way one's body is developing. The culture says it's okay to be violent towards those bodies or dismissive of their humanity. How do we actively push against rape culture? What can be done within our families, our institutions, and the media?
Well, I think you already named it. I think what y'all were talking about is we have to take responsibility for what's happening in our homes. Most of the times that people are going to experience child sexual abuse is going to be in the family home. These conversations start in the family home, and I think we spend a lot of time in the public talking generally to the public, and we're like, hey, stop it. And it's like, actually, you need to go home. And you need to navigate what is happening with your child and your extended family. And that is harder. I will acknowledge I also don't like to try to tell my parents what to do. They don't listen very well. But it is actually my job. These are my children. And that means it's actually my responsibility and nobody else's, which is part of the reason why we introduced the family policing system, because we don't want to be responsible for one another, because we don't want to be the one who taps the neighbor on the shoulder and says, hey, that's not okay, do better by that baby, because it's something that we have not learned to flex that muscle. We're too busy giving that responsibility and those consequences so comfortably to everyone else. And so the first pack that I wrote on Galaxy Guide is about bodily autonomy, and it's literally about how do we talk to people around us? How do we actually even organize ourselves with our children when they are wearing something that we know that people in the family are going to have a hard time with? Why are we going to those families' houses? Why aren't we talking to our child and being like, how do you feel wearing that? And like, I feel great. How do you feel when you go to grandma's house wearing that? I feel terrible. Maybe we don't go there. Maybe we learn how to support our children's healthy exploration of their sexuality, sensuality, artistry, how they want to adorn their bodies, because we've been doing it since the beginning of time. But instead of doing that, we restrict, and we do what we do in the United States. We try to control, we try to police, we try to make it the child's responsibility. And that results in our kids being hurt. And then when they're hurt and they tell us, we're like, well, why'd you do that? Why did you have the audacity to show up as your full self when all we've been telling you this whole time is that's against the rules? And so we have a lot of work to do, and a lot of that work is nowhere else but in our own homes.
Thank you, Tashmica.
Ditto. Wholeheartedly agree. And I think we need to talk about a term of family supremacy, that we, we talk about white supremacy, we talk about male supremacy, and we have to talk about family supremacy in ways in which we are taught to protect the family at all costs, all the time. And then I believe that then that grows to, then that's why we protect entertainers, because they become extension, or we protect the pastor or the imam, or, we're protecting all these things, because it's like we're taught the family institution is the first institution that we're taught to protect, and by any means necessary. And so I think that plays a role in allowing rape culture to occur. I can remember, now it sounds crazy, but I remember getting hickeys from family members, male family members as a kid. And it was like, oh, it's so cute. He was sucking on your cheek for so long, and now, and it's just like, what was that about? You know what I'm saying? As a kid, I didn't know, but now, and then at the same time, when I was a teenager and got hickeys consensually, I was in trouble. You know what I'm saying? Right. So it's just this, so that's what I'm saying about the family. Like, so it's all of that. I also think in terms of adultification, that so often that we need, and I'm using need in quotations, our children, like if we're working double shifts or all, like we need them to be grown or act grown, or if they're the firstborn. So then it reverberates in all these ways in which how we rely on children on the one hand to be grown, and on the other hand, they're silenced and don't have any agency whatsoever.
Thank you, Aishah.
I'm all about kind of going into the psyche and figuring out why do you think that way. I think that first, families need to stop thinking of rape as something that is a result of desire, and more so to control. Because then you wouldn't be saying, oh, why are you wearing that? You're going to attract this. Why are you wearing that? Nobody should look at what I am wearing, what I'm doing, how I'm moving, and think that they should attack me. No one in this family that is grown should be looking at a child. It's all about desire, and people not seeing them as abusers as it is. That's why you are the provoker. I think the nasty, ugly truth that a lot of families don't want to admit is that they, in some ways, see rape as a rite of passage. Because back in slavery, unfortunately.
Can we just pause? I just want to invite everyone to take a breath on that. Because that is so real. And I think it will play into the next PSA also that you all revealed in August, especially with young men. But yes, please continue. But I just wanted to acknowledge the gasp in the room, because people really felt that. Mm-hmm.
In my film, we explore how mothers would prepare their daughters mentally for what was going to happen to them with slave masters. In whatever ways that they could, because how could you prepare somebody for something like that? And I think that mentality has continued on, because everybody knows, no matter how much they don't want to admit it, the world is very, very hard for us. So I think they feel like if you can get through that, okay, now you're prepared for the world. I truly do think, I think that it's a rite of passage for boys in a different way, where they feel like, okay, now you're a man and now you can enter the dating scene. For us, it's like, okay, now you know the cruelness of the world. Now you can maneuver better. Now you can stand stronger, because also we're told we have to persevere through the worst type of storm. And I think if we can go into our minds and really dissect all of those things, I think that is going to be the beginning of us stopping the spewing to our Black girls.
Thank you. I think that one of the things that can, help us fight rape culture is just consent. And I think it's like, as a child, I didn't know that I had consent. I didn't know what consent was. I didn't know what the concept of consent was. And there are so many times when I look back as, when I was a child, or even moments when I was, a young girl pursuing a musical career, and it's like, I was coerced. I was placed in situations where I was made to feel that if I didn't do certain things, that I wasn't going to get to the next place. And, for the most part, I always walked away. But there was one incident that happened where, unfortunately, I was backed into a corner. I couldn't walk away, but consent is something that a lot of children don't understand that they have the right to have. And then I feel a lot of boys are never taught what consent is. Even today, I'm like, certain conversations that are happening, I'm like, so when you're detailing this event to me, you don't understand that this woman didn't give you consent to do that? You don't understand that she said no? Like, we need more fathers in the home, and we need fathers in the home that understand the word consent, what that is, and how to teach their boys. This is how you get consent. The moment a girl even insinuates no, that's rape, period. She might not have the verbiage. She might feel so much pressure in the moment. But sometimes even your body language, the way you're tensing up, that is a no. And I think a lot of men and other women don't realize, the word consent. And then I think that another thing about rape culture too is a lot of people feel that they are owed something in certain moments. And that's something, again, that I think that everyone needs to be educated on, whether you're a young girl, a young boy, or, a woman. Again, I'm just looking at the news and I'm like, you 35, you ain't understand that you could say no, right? I think that a lot of people feel that when they're in certain rooms, well, we're in the room. Right. So and it's like, no. We can be in the room. We could be about to do certain things. If your breath stink, we not doing this. Right. Period. Right. You know what I mean? And so I feel like,
the consent is not
there. Am I the only one who's had?
The consent is not there.
Don't leave me. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. I've been there. Okay. I'm a human being. Yeah, 5 minutes ago, this was going to go down. But then, you weren't zestfully clean.
Yeah.
So, hello. But yeah, so I feel like those are two concepts that I feel like we really need to educate folks on. When I look back at my schooling and I think about sex ed, yes, they taught you, this goes here and this feels like this. But nobody sat down and taught us kids, us 11-year-olds, us 12-year-olds who were, in the hallways in between periods, tongue kissing each other and touching each other. Nobody taught us that this is what consent is. So yeah, I feel like that's something that needs to be taught more.
Thank you. And I think,
can I just add a real quick thing? This brought to mind a story in my family, or something I have seen in my family, and I just want to offer up too that there is this thing, right, of our intergenerational trauma where the women in my family knew that men were unsafe, but they didn't have power to stop it. And so part of the rules came from a powerlessness. And it wasn't even this idea that no one's thinking about rape culture. They're just thinking about don't let the men bathe the children. And that's where the rules came from. And so it's not just a transition of like, this is bad, don't do that anymore. It's like, it's a moment of like, no, we actually do have power, a different sense of power than our elders did. And so I'm like feeling a lot of sadness for my grandmother, my great grandmother, in terms of like where these rules came from, and knowing that while I'm here talking about what they should do, what I wish they were doing, I also know that we experienced a level of exploitation and a level of rape that was so ongoing and consistent that the idea that they would ever at any time have the option to practice consent, like, what even is that? And so I just feel really grateful that we're having this conversation, because the thing is, intergenerational trauma, you know, sure, but there's also intergenerational healing. And so we have a responsibility to transition out of that sense of powerlessness with ourselves and with our children. And that is the thing that's going to actually change rape culture. It's going to be because we're like, actually, no, we're not living that reality anymore.
Yes. Thank you. I wholeheartedly agree. And I think building a culture of consent culture is something that has to be integrated in schools, in corporate workspaces. I lead a company, and I try to make sure that when I'm delegating tasks, I always say, is that okay with you? Because too often people say, this needs to happen Thursday. I don't know what's going on with them, if they have the emotional capacity or whatever capacity they need to get this done. So I just want to have a culture of saying, does this work for you? Yes. Does this? So even building that into workplaces, schools, into families. So often we're telling go give this family member a hug, and you know, give them an opportunity. Are you good? She's not in the mood to hug right now. Speak up, stand in the gap for that child, so that they understand that they have agency over their bodies at 2, 3, 4, even as a baby, as an 11th-month-old. You don't want to go to auntie? That's all right this time, you know? And so I think that is a very important part of the healing journey. With that, you all have brought so much, and I would love to invite a few audience members to ask these incredible panelists a few questions. Yes.
I'm the oldest of 4. I just thought of it when you were talking. I'm the oldest of 4, and again, I'm a survivor of being assaulted as a kid. My last sibling is a girl, my sister. And when she was a toddler, I used to look at her in the eye, and I would go like this, like to motion to go touch her privates. And I would say, no, no, no. Like I would say that to her until she got it to say, no, no, no. And it goes back to what you were saying, teaching this at home, and not only teaching consent, but also teaching kids that they have power over their body too. So if someone is approaching you to touch you a certain way, it's okay for you to say no. It's okay for you to say stop it. It's okay to yell out mommy, yell out daddy. Because again, when I think about when I was younger, you triggered this because you said, don't let the men bathe the kids. My cousin, who was assaulting me since I was 4, that's how he did it. It was him bathing me. And he was my favorite cousin. And so, of course, this is my favorite cousin. I get to spend time with my cousin. But nobody ever did the no for me. Nobody ever said, hey, don't let any, And so, yeah, just want to add that to that conversation, too. It's another way we can start at home, telling our kids, showing our kids certain body parts and saying, this is not right. If I don't let anyone do this to you, I think that can also help with rape culture as well.
Thank you.
And can I just briefly, one quick, I just wanted to say.
One moment, Aishah. Yeah, I'm going to say yes, but I would love to, if people can start to raise their hands as you speak, that would be great. Okay.
And I'll just be very quick just to say that it's in addition to learning how to say no or speak up and speak out, to really believe and be there because speaking as somebody who did say no, who did speak out, and nobody responded. So that it's important for the children to have the body autonomy and know it, but they also have to know that, as you said, Jos, that there's going to be an adult's going to stand in the gap.
Yeah, thank you. Question?
Thank you, ladies and femmes, for sharing today. My name is Soraya Nicole, and my question for you guys today is, what are your self-care practices to keep you or young Black girls and femmes in the right mindset, in the right balance of life with this adultification? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Does anyone want to answer that? One or two people?
I really want to encourage anybody who is a survivor who finds themselves moving towards this work to remember that your story is not a commodity. It is not something that people just get to ask you for whenever they want to. You are not a show pony. You don't have to monetize your experience. Even if you choose to share your story one time, you never have to say it again if you don't want to. I rarely tell my story anymore. I tell people I'm a survivor, but not everybody is trustworthy enough to hold my story. And I realized early on that people were going to freeze me in time. The first time someone read an article, it was the first article that actually was put out about me. I remember that same week I went to the grocery store, and I always think about this because I was picking out avocados. And this white woman walked up to me and was just like, "Oh my God, I just read your story in the Lansing State Journal." And I'm just like, I'm just trying to get fucking avocados, lady. Like, I'm not here for this at all. Like, I don't have my PowerPoint. You know what I mean? Like, this is not what we're doing here. But there's something about Black women that already people think they own us. How many times have you been treated like staff? Just because you happen to be in a facility where staff exist. Right. So I didn't know that, though, and I started telling my story when I was a teenager. And so I was lucky that I was a teenager before there was Instagram. I thank God every day that is the truth. But a lot of people are not going to get that experience. And a lot of people are going to be very vulnerable, and they're going to share things that are intensely personal, and they will never be allowed to forget that. And so I just want to really encourage folks to take ownership of yourself and your story, and don't let people walk all over that. Like, draw that line in the sand and let that sand be concrete. And then you make a life for yourself that is full of joy, that is not centered around your trauma. And it's okay, and I don't want anybody to feel bad. Like, listen, look at me. I'm up on a stage talking about trauma, so let's be honest. But I don't mean to say that having a life where you are doing advocacy is a problem. What I am saying, though, is it is very easy for the world to make that your story, and they do not allow you to have anything else. And so people would be very surprised to see me in my garden covered in dog hair, you know what I mean? Like, braless, shoeless, like living my life, because my whole life is not trauma. My whole life is growing joy and cultivating the healing that I want in my own family. And so I know self-care is like a thing where like bubble baths and like walks and whatever. And I'm like, that's great. What's more important, though, is that you maintain your selfhood.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
One of the things that I've been doing since 2002 is meditating, going on meditation retreats, and I've been in therapy since 92, when I was 23. So the meditation and therapy, and I've actually pivoted. While I always will be survivor centered, I'm pivoting after like 30 something years of doing this work to really leading with mindfulness, meditation, and healing, because I think it's important to do the advocacy work, but I realized that I was burned out telling my story all the time over and over again. So it's just, for me, it's like, how can I offer support, healing guidance, for survivors without leading in the way in which I have led? And that's for me through meditation.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Very similarly, I go see that lady. Every week I pay that lady to talk to her. My therapist has literally saved my life. Just uncovering so much. And it's so crazy that the adultification and sexual violence that we've experienced, it'll come up in little things. Like the way I won't be able to approach a conversation in business, it'll be because I was silenced because I was a kid. So it's like, therapy is so big for me. Also meditating, because it grounds me. And my therapist does implement meditation in session because, anxiety from trauma it will make you feel like you're still in that body or still in that mind. So it helps ground me and remember where I am. But definitely therapy, definitely journaling. I have a beautiful village around me. So me and my friends are very open and talk about our experiences and how we want to be better. And I think community and that lady, definitely.
That lady. You have anything?
I take naps.
That works. Yes. Okay.
Hi, how do I talk? Can y'all hear me? Yes. Perfect. Okay. First I want to say thank you to everybody on the panel. This has been very eye-opening for me. My name is Maya. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and she's the reason why I am here. The sexual trauma in my family is intergenerational. And so while I was sitting here listening to you guys have the conversation, what I was really thinking about is how do I balance allowing my daughter to be a child. Like, I do allow her to be a child, but I also know that, like, the world is what it is. And so I don't want to adultify her, but I also don't want to let her walk out into the world and be naive. So, like, how do I find that balance?
Of course you can, Tarana.
I'm sorry. Hey, y'all. I'm just chomping at the bit. I just wanted to share something that when I talk to parents, what I tell them all the time is you have to parent with vigilance and not fear. So it is, and it's sort of like a formula. I have a child as well, and I was very vigilant about where they went, who was around them, who I allowed to be in their space. But I didn't have a lot of fear. I did have fear, actually. To be truthful, I did have fear. I didn't want to transfer that fear to my child. And so I had to manage my own fears while trying to, be vigilant about everything that was going on in their life, but not allow them to be fearful. And as a result, they grow up freer and happier and with more joy and more access to that. And I let it be my job to be vigilant around. I remember my child used to be scared to go through basketball court. They're a survivor, which is public information. I'm not disclosing for them. But they used to be scared to go through basketball courts or anywhere where groups of men were gathered. And we had to work through that very carefully. I wanted to honor and respect the fact that they had trepidation around that, and I knew where it came from. But I didn't want them to grow up and be scared of black men. Mm-hmm. So we had to, I just worked with that. I was really vigilant about who specifically, the men that I had in their life and, the experiences they had. I worked on my fears, and I made sure that I tried to swallow theirs. So I just wanted to offer that. Wow.
I just want to. I think I just want to. I want to say something, and I want to make sure that I'm being very, very clear because it's very easy for this to be misconstrued. But my goal has always been, because we live in a world where sexual violence, even sexual harassment, right, catcalling, grooming, just inappropriate behavior by men is so casual in our culture, right? And nobody intervenes, right, in those moments. And I shouldn't say nobody, but so often, right? And so for me, it became about asking my children good questions about what's happening in their world versus constantly trying to make it their responsibility to be the one who sees the thing that is a problem. It's actually not necessarily my child's responsibility to know that something is sexually violent. But like, for example, when my kids were little and they were going on sleepovers, I would say, so what was the night like? Where did you sleep? Right? Like, that no one's allowed in your sleeping bag, right? So like questions I was asking to my child, just like Pixar movies will have adult jokes in it and the adults will giggle and the kids are like, I don't know what we're laughing at. So a lot of my questions were things that maybe me and my partner understand that these questions are very much about environment that my child is in when I am not there physically present. And the same for the adults, right? Like when I'm dropping my kid off, I have boundaries and I'm communicating to the adults. My child is not responsible for creating the boundaries that keep them safe. The adults are responsible for that. So my beef, my questions, all of that is for the adults in the room. Whether it's a coach or a teacher or a cousin or a family member, it's actually my responsibility to do that. And as my kids get older, just like a Pixar movie, they start to hear the joke, right? They start to know what I'm asking. They start to be able to identify, because in age-appropriate ways, I can then have that conversation with them when it feels like the right time to do that, when it feels like it's the right time for them to understand what I'm looking for and why I'm asking. And then the last thing is really the first thing that I said. My job is, I have never prayed for my children to be safe, but I have always there's no way for me to guarantee that my children will never experience some form of sexual violence in this world. What I can guarantee is that when they come to me with that I will be there for them and that I will help make it better. Not perfect, not healed. I don't have that power. But they know their mother will always be with them.
Chanel, you used a term earlier, protection or projection. Could you briefly elaborate on that? I think it's relevant to this question.
Definitely. And I did want to say to you, you're already starting out great because you're here. Yeah. Not a lot of people would see an event related to their child and actually go and spend their time there. So you're already there. And I think the real big difference between protection and projection is the approach to it. Once again, I think all of us have said in our own ways, letting them know that this world can be cruel, but you are not innately doing anything that's making it wrong. So I think the language and leading with compassion, like let's say, she wore a dress and a grown man made a comment about it and she didn't really like how that felt. Well, how did it make you feel? Okay, what did they say? Let's break this down. Like, let that be a teachable moment. This is someone trying to police. This is someone that is trying to do harm. You didn't do anything to invite that. Really assuring them that you are not this problem that everyone is now seeking. And I think that is where the protection kind of comes over and we leave projection out of the way. Just letting them know just how this world works and how there's a lot of people working to try to make it better, but it's still not all the way where it needs to be. And this is how we can keep you whole within yourself, having agency, but also keeping you safe in a way. So I think if you kind of take away the ownership of the abuse to the abusee, then that really, really helps. But you're already on a great path, Noah.
Thank you. With all of you, and I'd love to do a brief little closeout exercise.
Hi, my name is Whitney Roberts. Oh, wow. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming here, for being lionesses in your own way and sharing your story so bravely and so openly. This is less of a question, just more of affirmation. I'm a mom of a 4-year-old girl, and I get it all the time from my family. Oh, here comes Whitney with all her rules, because I have already instilled in her at 4 that she does not have to hug everybody, and we don't have to go to everything, and we don't have to do everything. And it was so difficult before being in this room to say that, like to stand up for the things that like I had been instilling in her, because I was like, you know what? No, because like I'd rather get the hits than she take whatever. And so I want to thank you, because this was wildly affirming for me, and I want to thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Jos,
well,
that was Jos. I'm sorry.
Sure.
There was one other person who had their hand up, and I just want to honor that. But I would ask, we're not going to probably have time for you each to respond, so maybe if one or two of you can respond to this last question. Thank you. We can throw this, but it just doesn't feel quite appropriate. So.
It is cute. Hello, beautiful women. I just wanted to say thank you for giving us your time and
giving us your insight, because it's definitely needed. But I had like 2 quick questions, and one of them is...
We can take one.
Okay, one of them is, what would you consider being adultified? Like, how do you know as a person, like, you know, I'm only 18, and like growing up, like, there's only but so much awareness that you get, especially from the female role models that you have in your life. So a lot of times they would have the understanding, but even they don't think that it's a necessary thing to teach you sometimes. So my question is, how do you know if you have been adultified in your life?
I'm the oldest of 4. Like, literally, I'm the oldest of 4. And I saw one young lady who was in your PSA who was like, she said that, I'm paraphrasing, but she said she would get shunned for knowing too much, knowing the things that she knew that she probably wasn't supposed to be taught, you know. And I feel like as the oldest of 4, I was a mom before I asked to be a mother. I was a caretaker before I was asked if I wanted to be that. So I lost a lot of consent very, very early, which is why too earlier I was talking about just consent. And I know we're talking about sexual assault, but just the concept of consent, I think, especially as Black girls, as Black women, is something that often we just really do not get to have. And a lot of times it happens with that firstborn daughter. Yeah, you definitely were adultified, whether you realize it or not. If you look back and you just look at your childhood, you were responsible for a lot of things very early.
And I think that actually combines adultification with parentification. So, yes. Does one more person want to answer that?
I would just say very simply that there are things that your children are not developmentally ready to carry. And we don't think about that a lot when we're asking our children to do things. So I know that sounds like a very science, but it is. Like, our children, when they are 4, have a different capacity to carry things than when they're 8 and 9, than when they're 12 and 13. And so really just becoming knowledgeable about what children have capacity for. Because I think sometimes we don't think about that. It's just whatever happened when we were young. So like, well, I was doing that by the time I was 9. Well, okay, sure. Context was different, and that is not actually they should not be developmentally responsible for navigating that situation. And so when I am talking to a parent who is concerned that something is going on with their kid, honestly, one of the hardest things for parents is when their kids start masturbating. And I have to say to them, this is a natural part of healthy sexuality. Here's how you know where that is. And I have to slide a paper across the table to them that's like, this is what healthy sexuality looks like over time. And so similarly, this is what it's okay to give your child this responsibility, just like chore charts. We know when a child is 4 and 5, they're going to need more reminders, easier chores than when they're 12 and 13. So we do have to take an approach that is really based in evidence and science and understanding children's development. And there are lots of parenting tools that can support that online, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yes. Do you want a microphone? Okay.
You may be raised in a household where you have a lot of responsible parents and they do all the right things, and then you go out on the street. What I see when I think about adultification of young Black girls, I think about our developing bodies. I had a little butt, when I was 9 or 10 years old, and I remember the distinct difference of how grown men interacted with me. That's another form of adultifying, like making you into a grown person when you're not. Like the way that people interact with you, particularly of the opposite sex, interact with you and treat you, not allowing you to have a healthy sexuality or to develop naturally, not allowing you to explore your sexuality, but making that something bad and making you feel bad, and them putting it, in layman's terms, putting their nastiness on you. Mm-hmm. That is another way that particularly Black girls get adultified so early. You have breasts, you have hips, you have a butt, and all of a sudden you're the problem. And that is a huge issue, particularly in our communities, right? I remember when I worked here in Philly, and my junior high school girls were talking about taking alternate routes home and, dressing differently because of what they knew they were going to encounter. You shouldn't have to do that at 11 and 12. That's what adultification also feels like.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's get to our last question. We're going to bring the conversation to a close. So I have one final question for each of you. I'd love to start with Aishah. And if we could keep this to about 60 seconds, just to make sure we stay within the time frame we have. What can be done on the family level to break generational cycles of abuse? It's a very heavy question.
Yeah. 60 seconds or level. Or 60 seconds or less. Right, exactly.
Maybe 90.
Okay. Thank you, Jos. I think it's very important, based on the statistics, that most folks most adults have experienced abuse. Child sexual abuse, adultification, some form of sexual violence. And regardless, and this is a strong thing, I want to be really mindful of it, that a lot of us were not protected as children or even as adults, or didn't get the help. It is really, really important to remember that we are not hazing, we're not pledging anyone. And so that just because people didn't believe you, do your best to believe a child. Even if you're like, wait, I can't believe so-and-so would do something like that. You don't let them know that. You think that in your head, but you are there. You stand in the gap for them. I very briefly, an example when I shared earlier around how I was told that by my parents that I was flirting, and therefore had was the reason why I experienced the harm that I experienced by a family friend. There was a young person in my life who had been harmed. And I remember asking her, I said, did you like him? And she looked at me like, oh my God. And I was like, it's okay if you liked him. It's okay. It was an adult who caused her harm. And I said, there's nothing wrong if you liked him, if you had a crush on him. I said, it was on him to draw the line. And you could just see, and she was, 16 at the time, that it was for her to have this adult in her life, somebody trusted, to ask her, did you like, and affirm that it was okay, and to be clear that what this man did to her was wrong. And so that's what we have to do instead of blaming children for their desires and all of that. That's part of life. They don't know what to do with all these hormones. And so do not blame them for men or other women or people taking advantage of them.
Thank you. Tashmica, what can people do to be resources for their children who may have experienced sexual harm?
So I think it's really important. One of the things that happens often when a child experiences harm and a parent gets that information, whether it's through a disclosure or through finding out in some other way, is we have been given a checklist, mostly by the state, right? Like, we need to call the police. We gotta they gotta go to therapy. We have like a to-do list, a checklist of how we get to a place where accountability, healing, and justice happens. And one of the things that I really wish parents would do first is allow their child to be a child who is hurt. And so I liken it to when my baby falls down and hurts themselves, right, when they were little. My first response wasn't to hurry up and fix it. My first response was to hold them, right? My first response was to bring them close to me and tell them that I love them so much. I'm so sorry that happened. Oh my God, how terrible, right? My first responsibility wasn't to deliver them to someone else to resolve the problem. And so I'm not saying that we don't seek justice or healing, we don't call a therapist. All of those things can happen, but think about the time when you were hurt. Think about how quickly you wanted to call a stranger into the room. Think about what you actually needed, right? You needed someone to make you your favorite food, watch your favorite cartoon, show up for you, sit with you until you had the wherewithal to move to the next stage. Children are not different from what we needed when we were children. So I understand the urge, but I also want to encourage people. Your children need capacity for something that is going to be really, really difficult if that's what they choose to do. And you are a resource that can provide them that capacity, not just later, not just as a support person to professionals, but as their main foundation for being grounded and cared for and ready
Thank you. Chanel, what is your message for young Black girls and teens who are experiencing adultification?
Be loud about it. Be loud with your no's and why it's a no and that boundary. Young people have always been like the first to get in front of something and learn something and help us unlearn. So I think being extremely loud about that and standing affirmed in that, I think go towards who validates you and not in that I'm insecure and I'm looking for someone to pour into me in that way, but look for the community, look for the people that is also going to mirror to you that I see you and your boundaries matter and they're okay. And it doesn't mean you have an attitude and it doesn't mean you're rude. It doesn't mean any of those things. Like really surround yourself with like-minded people as well as yourself, but be so freaking loud about your no and about your boundaries and call it out. You're adultifying me. Okay. You know how like everyone like uses narcissist because they know what that word is in gaslighting now? I think we need to put like adultifying under gaslighting. You're adultifying me right now.
And gaslighting me at the same time.
And gaslighting me about the adultification. Absolutely.
You narcissist.
Okay. Hello. You gaslighting narcissist. You adultifying me. You think I'm grown, damn it, I'm about to be grown in a minute with these words. Okay? Like, just be firm in that because that firmness is going to take you on to being an adult that can also walk into that firmness. So I think surround yourself with community and be firm with whoever is trying to hold you back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Jessie, how can the media contribute to reshaping the narrative of grown Black girls?
How much time do we have? Jeez.
90 seconds.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the media is just so disgusting to Black girls. You know, that's such a loaded question. And, you know, nowadays the media includes blogs, it includes YouTubers, it includes the comment section. So it's like, that's such a loaded question and there's so many solutions. It takes us all. You know, when we see a blog site, you know, posting about a Black girl a certain way, like I saw recently, you know, Diddy's daughters were getting ready for their high school prom and the comment sections were so crazy and it was coming from a lot of us, you know, and it's like, well, what you expect them to do? They wasn't getting the baby oil. They wasn't doing that. That was their dad. And so I think just a lot of us think that every comment section is the shade room, and it's not. Like, we really need to be kinder to each other, and we need to have more empathy, and we need to have more understanding, have more grace, have more respect. And yeah, it's so loaded. I think for me, I just don't interact with certain pages, certain comment sections, certain voices online that, you know, exist to destroy Black girls, you know, and I think that if we all contributed to that, the media would be better. You know, Black female rage sells. The disrespect of Black women sells. Like, it is clickbait, it's rage bait, it's great for engagement farming. And I think that if we all just took a step back and didn't engage, at the very least, I think that would send a loud message to the media, which is like, yeah, this ain't it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So sorry. There's people that have pages pretending to be a Black woman that spew that hate. Like, it'll be a whole white man behind the page.
Or a bot.
Or a bot, and they will spew this negativity to us. You can tell because they use the word Blacks. Yeah. But, hold on. Or woke. I'm like, a person of Negro descent wouldn't say that. But that's how profitable it is, that you can just put this Black woman as your profile picture, take some of our verbiage, and then spew that negativity out to us. It's really sick, and I think that because people feel so proud of their beliefs in person, that it makes them feel invincible online. I've even seen memes of like, it looked very similar to like the Mammy and the Jezebel ones back in the day. I know you've probably seen that where they'll darken, it's like a cartoon, they'll darken a woman's face, the pink big lips. I never thought I would see that in 2025. And our kids are seeing that. Like, we got an opportunity to have a childhood without that shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, you said it beautifully, it's profitable.
I think we have held, as Shashina said, a very large container for these issues, which are, they're weighty, and we've taken some space, but I think it's good practice to round out conversations like this with a vision for what could be. And I would love to just take a moment to think about this space as planting seeds for something that could grow. So I'd like to invite everyone to just say a word. When you think about a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old Black girl, what does she deserve? What kind of freedom, joy, possibility, laughter? Like, let's just plant some energy through shouting out words for what our Black girls deserve in their childhoods. Protection, love.
Trusting adults.
Thank you. You want to keep going? Keep going. Keep going. Yes. Beauty. Thank you so much. And let's give it, I want to thank all of our wonderful panelists. Let's give it up one more time for Aishah Shahidah Simmons, Chanel Dupree, Tashmica Torok, and Jessie Woo. And again, I'm Jos Duncan Asé. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again to Tarana Burke and Shashina Bray. Thanks, everyone.
Let's give another round of applause for our moderator and our panelists. I'd like to invite up Danny and Samyukta to close us out. I'm going to ask our panelists just sit pretty. We would like to get a collective picture with you all towards the end. Thank you. Whichever one you prefer.
I don't want to be Hi, y'all. My name is Danny Ayers. I'm CEO at Me Too International. And I know we're a little bit behind time, so I'm going to be really quick. And I was sitting there. There are so many gems. There are so many amazing things that were shared. I'm so glad that we're streaming this, and I'm so glad we're going to have this conversation to continue to share and think through and talk through. And, Me Too, we do a lot of work, and we know that the work of interrupting and ending sexual violence is multifaceted, and it takes many different things, and it's going to take many different people, but we felt really clear that this conversation was so important to pull out and have. Creating this PSA was so important for us, and you all really honored the conversation in a deep and meaningful way, and I'm so grateful to each of you for doing that for us. I would say that leaving this conversation, what I'm thinking about and what I feel is really important for us to do as we move into the world. First of all, we used a lot of words with a lot of syllables in them. And we do that in movement space, right? And I would say, to really explore those terms, look online what they mean. We put up the definition of rape culture, really explore what that means. We talked about consent culture, adultification, right? These are all terms that have a wide berth, and to dive into them and really think about them if you're curious about them as you leave this space. I also encourage, these are kitchen table conversations. These are conversations to have with friends, to have with your family. bring this into the world. What you heard tonight, what you're thinking about, what's sitting in your gut, bring that into the world. Be brave in having the conversation. Part of the reason sexual violence remains prevalent is because of the shame around it. And we have to push through that and really work through what we're seeing in our communities in a really brave and powerful way. I love that what you said, Chanel, about getting loud. I think that's a really important way that we have to move through this. Also, as parents, the job is on the adults in the room to create the rules about what it means to allow children to be children and design the experiences that they have to the best of your ability. I just want to say thank you again to the panelists. I'm going to stop there so we can begin to wrap up and pass to Tashmica, who is also on our team. Thank you. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you all so much. My name is Tashmica. I am program manager at Me Too. I want to echo thank yous. I have many thank yous that I will share shortly, but before I move, I just want to name that at Me Too, we really center healing in action. And so this has been such a full and deep and wide conversation that I am so grateful that we were able to have. And I want to make sure that folks have some tools to support your own healing and the healing of the communities that you're going back to, whether that's your homes or the people that you work with, young people in your communities. And so 2 resources that I'll highlight are Survivor Sanctuary, which you'll see the QR code in a moment. It is our self-guided healing platform designed to meet survivors wherever they are, right? We recognize a lot of times survivors are healing in the same places where they were harmed, whether that's at home or in school or their workplace or place of worship. And so Survivor Sanctuary brings healing to you there. And so there are 36 healing lessons ranging from 5 minutes to 25 minutes or more. There's opportunities to dance, to journal, to do affirmation practices. Whatever ways you might want to engage with your healing, there is something for you on there. So I highly, highly recommend you check it out. You find what works for you and add that to your toolkit to support you and again, to support the other people that you're in community with. The second resource that I'll share is our Me Too Healing Resource Library, which has right now over 1,000 resources, which is wild because they are survivor-specific, culturally responsive resources that are made for us, that are made to make sure that survivors can look for legal support, for housing, for support with substance use, in their zip code, right? So it's searchable by zip code. It's also filtered by identities you might hold. And so if you're looking specifically for resources that support South Asian survivors, I can go on our Me Too Healing Resource Library and do that, right? So I highly encourage you to use that tool for yourselves, use that tool for folks that you work with, that you are in relationship with. And now I would like to begin my thank yous very briefly, but definitely would recommend please checking out those resources, and they're both here on this slideshow behind me. Okay, so, all right, so first I would love to just give another thank you to the panelists, Tashmica, Aishah, Chanel, Jessie. The vulnerability, the courageousness, the boldness, and the wisdom that you've shared with us today is incredible. I feel like this room was so moved so many times. So thank you for being willing to share that with us here today. Jos, thank you for holding this conversation with so much care and love and really making space for us to end on a note of visioning and dreaming what this future could look like, because that's what we're building towards. So thank you. I would love to thank the Barnes Foundation team. Thank you so much to James. Thank you to Sophie. Thank you to Stephen back there in the booth. Thank you to Anthony, Rob, Eric, all of the folks who have made the behind the scenes of today go so smoothly. I really, really appreciate you all. And thank you to Constellation Catering for the reception that we're about to enjoy in just a moment. I would like to say a big thank you to ACT TV team, who's made sure that everything that's happened in this room has also been shared with our global audience. And so they've been able to tune in through Facebook and YouTube. And so grateful. Thank you for the ACT TV team. I would love to also thank Billy Sanders, who has been providing ASL interpretation, making sure that our programming is accessible to our folks. So thank you for always rocking with us in person and virtually. I would love to thank Aishah, who's been providing healing support in
both in person and online always. If you're looking for healing resources or just a moment to process, she's outside in the classroom across the way. Versus TV, thank you for their collaboration in building this PSA that you saw today, as well as for the PSA, the barbershop, which will be premiering in August, discussing the normalization of sexual violence against Black boys. And so definitely stay tuned for that conversation and that PSA. And last but certainly not least, thank you to the Me Too team for everything that you've done to make today possible, and people that have traveled from far and wide to make today happen, but also people who aren't here and made all the logistics go as smooth as they did. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for holding a vision, an unwavering vision that we deserve, and we are building towards a future without sexual violence, and that is possible. Like that, to be among people like that, yeah, thank you. Thank you, and thank you all so much for being here. To our reception.